This week was the NFL's annual meetings, aka the owners' meetings in West Palm Beach. I was there, and a lot of times it's the first time for coaches and general managers to weigh in on off-season moves. Well, we heard from D'Amico Ryans earlier this week. How about general manager Nick Caserio? He visited with the Houston Texans YouTube page, and he talked a lot about this team. And Caserio is in a tenuous spot. He's got a lot to do with this team to make sure they are better in 2025 from a roster standpoint. While fine-tuning something on defense, there's a lot more work on offense to be done. One of his biggest challenges, figuring out the offensive line. Well, Caserio weighed in on the offensive linemen that they've added. And here's what the general manager had to say about a position that he's had a tough time finding good players.
We have a lot of players that have a lot of playing experience, so including some of our own players. We brought in some players externally from Lakin Tomlinson, who's played a lot of football. Signed Trent, who's coming back a little bit from an injury, so we'll kind of see how he progresses. Signed Cam Robinson. So I think when you look at that group overall, have a lot of players that have played a lot of football, that have played a lot of snaps. The big thing now is kind of focus what can they do in our system. And we'll get more information as we go from the spring through the summer and into training camp.
Caserio echoing some of the things that D'Amico Ryans had to say about the offensive line. Look, this has very much been the conversation post-Laramie Tunsil. Life after Laramie, when it comes to this offensive line, is very much about exactly what they can put together as a whole and having the whole be greater than the sum of the parts. Having all five guys work together and try to improve the floor while the ceiling maybe is a lot lower, especially at left tackle, where it looks like Cam Robinson is going to get the first and best crack at being this team's left tackle. Now, I don't love the idea of Cam Robinson with the high commitment. I probably would have spent the money on a guard spot and tried to figure out tackle another way, but Robinson's played some decent football at left tackle. Kevin O'Connell, who was the Vikings head coach, had some really nice things to say about Robinson at the owners' meetings as well, and he can get enough done in 2025 for the Houston Texans. If you've been around me when I've talked about football for any amount of time, I'm not the biggest fan of you have to be great at left tackle. Most teams can get by with being just okay at left tackle and go where they want to go. The Texans are hoping to be the latest example. If Cam Robinson's just okay at left tackle and the rest of the guys take care of their business and they raise the floor of that offensive line, hey, all they need to do is be, the 20th best offensive line in football after being one of the 3 or 4 worst, and they should have a nice jump on offense, be able to take care of their business. I still want them to go out there and find some more offensive linemen via the NFL draft. Yeah, linemen, plural. 2 of them, please. Preferably a tackle and a guard, but if you want to go add 2 guards, be my guest. You want to go add a guard and a center? Go for it. You want to go add 2 tackles that can play guard and then play tackle after that? Why not? Okay? Linemen, plural, for the NFL draft here in just a few weeks. Wide receiver, another interesting position. Not as much complimentary about the players that they've added when Caserio was talking to Mark Vandermeer. A lot about the players that they already had in the building.
Everybody's going to kind of create their role based on their performance. So varying levels of experience within that group. Kirk is a player that we've played against twice a year here for the last few years. With Nico returning, we'll kind of see how Tank progresses. I think D'Amico had some comments about him the other day. So we'll kind of take it day by day, but it's a good opportunity for some new faces in addition to some of the players that are returning. Everybody wants to talk about Nico. We got Metz coming back. We got Hutch coming back. Have some of our younger players around the practice squad. Last season, Jared Wayne, Xavier Johnson, who potentially are going to put themselves in a position to compete for some snaps.
Would it have killed Caserio to say something nice about Justin Watson or Braxton Berrios or even a little bit more about Christian Kirk? Wouldn't it have really twisted his arm to do that? Hey, D'Amico Ryans had a lot of nice things to say about the wideouts. We talked about that on the channel recently, but Nick Caserio want to talk about the guys that were on the team last year, practice squad players like Jared Wayne and Xavier Johnson, and guys who were on the depth chart last year, Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie. That's fine. You can talk about those guys. They're going to be a factor. They're going to be in training camp, part of OTAs, the offseason. But you can't rely on any of those players. I don't want to dismiss being on an NFL team for a whole season or sticking around on a practice squad, but you can't bet on Xavier Johnson and Jared Wayne, Hutchinson and Mechie and those guys to take care of business in the wide receiver room. And a large part of why Braxton Berrios and Watson are here are to push those guys. Watson can kind of be the gatekeeper. If you're better than Justin Watson, hey, they'll put you on the squad. If you're not as good as Justin Watson, see you. Maybe the practice squad or another team is better suited for you. But just like with the offensive line, I'd like to see a draft pick at the wide receiver spot. And maybe even after the draft is over, a veteran who's still hanging around the NFL free agency landscape. Fingers crossed for Tyler Lockett, righting a wrong from the draft so many years ago when the Seahawks snuck in front of the Texans to draft Tyler Lockett, but still plenty to add to the wide receiver position. The way Caserio talked about the offseason felt like moves are done for now. And just a few weeks away from the draft, you should be in draft mode. And do you draft for need? Do you draft for best player available? Well, I felt like the way Nick Caserio explained how they put things together kind of put into focus exactly what the Texans are going to do. And here's what the general manager said, and I'll tell you where the clue is in there.
We'll go through the process of stacking the board. We're grading the player based on what we think their role potentially is going to be in our system. And we're just going to pick the best players that we feel fit the Houston Texans. So there's no positions that are really off limits. We've never really approached it that way.
So Caserio laid it out, and no, they're not going to eliminate any position. Yeah, okay, you're not drafting a kicker in the first round. I know that, Nick Caserio. But what he did say there is we're going to stack the board based on how that player operates within our system. So when you start to think about that, okay, if they drafted a defensive tackle in the first round, where's that guy playing right away? Well, he's on the depth chart at defensive tackle, but he's not a starter right away. What's the role for that player on day one? You draft a wide receiver at 25, that player can be on the field when you put three wide receivers on the field. He has a very clear starting role right away. You draft an offensive lineman. Hey, it's a battle on the offensive line, but you could see that player starting right away on the offensive line. So while teams will tell you time and time again, it's best player available, you put the best player available that fits what you need. That's what they truly mean to say. And there are some players that just aren't going to fit what the Texans want to do and should do. Offensive linemen that aren't adept in the scheme or style of run game that they're going to run, which is just a guess at this point. And the Texans probably still have a little bit of a guess. I mean, they have an idea of what they want to do, but until those guys go out there and try to run it, they don't exactly know about it. And when you think about wide receivers, okay, there's an opening opposite Nico Collins. So maybe guys that have the ability to play outside versus slot-centric receivers. Though Christian Kirk is a one-year commitment at this point. So if you want to draft a slot guy that maybe can play a little bit outside and then move in to the slot when Kirk departs, that's something you could do as well. So it's not best player available. It's not need only. It's best player available within the need that the Texans have. That's how everybody pretty much does it, except for the Raiders when Al Davis was running things. They just picked the fastest guy or the strongest guy every time. And they did draft a kicker in the first round. Caserio should talk to the Houston media before the NFL draft, so maybe there'll be a little bit more like an entree to get out of Caserio from that conversation. This one, just a small appetizer plate, and maybe they forgot one of your sauces there on your appetizer plate. You ever get a triple dipper and they don't bring you the sauce for the Southwestern egg rolls when you're over there at the Chili's? And you're like, hey, excuse me, can I get the slightly green, almost ranch sauce that I actually have no idea what it's called, and I couldn't order it by name. I just order it by description. I believe you forgot that off of my plate. Thank you. I appreciate you. And, oh, by the way, I could use another Coke Zero when you get a chance. I promise. That sounds like it's rude to the waiter, but I promise I'm very nice to waiters. I promise. 3 weeks away from the NFL draft, myself, Landry Locker, the SNL channel will have a draft night one stream, draft night two stream, and then we'll have a party for you on the third day of the NFL draft. Come out, hang out. We'll talk about the first 2 days. We'll watch the third day together, talk about Texans football, have some drinks, have some food. We'll put it together. Be on the lookout for the location of that. Appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.